Claus sucked, and they just gave up at that point. That's not all for this game, though. I gotta mention this bizarre thing that caught me in mobile part. Once you get on the road, instead of following the signs, go the way the game wants you to. If you go in the opposite direction, you take a few steps to start. Suddenly you get ambushed by some unkillable monster that you're basically a creature process of life, and there's literally nothing you can do. It always kills you eventually, and that's that. And a quick bonus for you from Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Ogdu's Revenge. It's bad enough you have to deal with the son of Ogdu, but there's actually a secret second fight that's actually worse. The first mini-boss most players encountered in Jedi Fallen Order was this big frog called Ogdu Bagdu, and it was a pain in the ass. This thing was a taunt to people who feared. You have to see your first death fighting this thing. For your second, third, fourth, it was hard. Being the son of Ogdu, get you Cal's original poncho from the first game, which is a nice Easter egg on its own, but if you head back to the shop at Rainbow's Reach, there's something new to find. You scan this frog guy, and you'll face a new challenge against the father and the son at the same time. One of them is bad enough, the two of them makes it easily one of the hardest fights in the game. The two frogs make Darth Vader look like a chump. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. The best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can find me on Twitter. Falcon. We'll see you next time right here on GameRanks.
I can feel it on my face. Get the fuck off. Oh yeah, man. There we go. A little bit of thunder for you.
Life is the best story. Pandora for every
You alright, Mo?
Video games have been through tons and tons of different trends over the years. Some have stuck around while others have not. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on GameRanks, 10 features that have completely disappeared from video games. Starting off with number 10, fancy boxes with bonus stuff. As total physical game sales get lower and lower every year, we can't help but feel a little nostalgic about game boxes. Like the actual box that a physical disc, CD, or cartridge came in. And yeah, nowadays, those physical pieces of media feel like maybe more of a hassle than anything else. Getting a physical game on release day can be a total crapshoot depending on where you live, and a lot of the time the full game isn't even on the disc anymore. And don't forget about those day one patches too. Now, obviously that wasn't always the case. Before digital became the de-facto way to get a game, the only way to get it was physically. And the further you go back, the more interesting things publishers would do to try to get player attention. Like PC game boxes used to be these huge, elaborate things that took up a ton of shelf space in a way that kind of resembled books, except for they would even have unusual shapes to really get a potential player's attention. But probably the coolest thing games would do was include a couple of extra things in the box. Some bonus extras known as freebies. Of course, we still get a few games that give you some stuff when you buy them, like special editions are huge. But the difference is that those cost more, sometimes a lot more. Well, way back when, many games came with free bonus stuff just to be like, hey, this game's worth it. Like the Civilization games were really good about that. They would regularly come with these gigantic 250-page manuals, poster-sized reference charts, just sort of really cool physical objects that grounded the game in something real. It wasn't just PC games with cool bonus stuff either. The US release of Earthbound had an oversized box that contained the entire strategy guide that was presented like an in-universe travel guide. And it's like a perfect example of what I just talked about. It's just this awesome thing that you just flip through for fun. Feelies aren't gone entirely with games. There's an entire marketplace of physical game pieces that usually include some little bonuses with them. But for major game publishers, if you buy a game, pretty much all you're going to get is a disc in an empty plastic case. Half the time they don't even bother with the black and white inserts anymore. They just don't care. And number 9 is cheat codes and passwords. With the rise of integrated multiplayer, achievements, and DLC, cheats and passwords don't have the kind of value they once did. It's understandable that a lot of games don't have them. Like if you're playing multiplayer, you're going to want a fair game, for instance. Obviously, people do still cheat online, but a developer isn't going to intentionally cheat in that breaks the character balance of their game. Like, that's entirely easy to get. it's a little less understandable when game makers do things like make it so you can pay to unlock stuff in a game. That's basically a cheat code you're paying for, and that sucks. But it used to just be a common thing that if you bought a game, you could cheat to your heart's content when you're alone in your house having a fun time. You can put in code, skip the level, activate God mode, whatever you want to do, just do it. Now, if you just screw around in the game and cheat, you're mostly out of luck. You'd think with so many developers talking about accessibility, they put in a cheats menu for people who want it, but I guess there's just too much money on the table for that. Now, there are a few holdouts, of course. The recent LEGO Star Wars game has a full-blown cheats menu and even a password system. Of course, you don't just get it right from the start. You have to earn the cheats rather than just use them. But that's something more along the lines of the Nintendo 64 era, and it's something at least. And number 8 is lives. Now, obviously, when you're making a list about features that are disappearing from games, it's not necessarily all going to be good features. Some people are going to hate some of these features, some are going to like them, but it's pretty clear the whole classic live system is kind of going the way of the dodo and being replaced with autosaves. Well, you know about lives. You know, a little number, you die, you lose one, and if you run out, you got to restart the level. That's a life, and many players think that it's a punishing and unfun mechanic that we need to move on.
Washing.
It's basically a holdover from arcades. In order for arcades to make money, a single quarter can't just let you play the game forever. So a quarter allots you a certain amount of lives. If you run out of those lives, you have to put in another quarter. It's understandable in that business model, but maybe not so much outside of that business model. But for an example of it going away, I want to just note the Sonic Origins collection. It's the first 4 Sonic games that completely eliminates lives from the standard game mode. Like, when I think of lives, the first games I think of are like Mario and Sonic, and I'm old enough to remember Mario in the arcade, but their newest games are mostly lives free. If you die in Mario Odyssey, you lose a few coins, and that's it. Even Mario is ditching that system. Of course, there's plenty of self-consciously retro indie games that still use lives, but a lot of games are trying something different, moving on to a less punishing system where you just lose some resources when you die, and you never lose all of your progress. Now, there are people who do like the tension that a live system brings to the game, but for the most part, it seems like games are moving away from it. Who knows, maybe in a few years they'll start missing it and implementing it as a feature you can earn or something. And number 7 is avatars and avatar rewards. Now, this is one that's absolutely dead and buried. Do you even remember this whole thing? On the Xbox 360, they introduced these little avatars right around the time that Nintendo Wii's were getting popular. And as a cool little bonus, they made it so certain costume pieces could actually be earned by completing achievements in specific games. Like, you could get a little unique helmet from Halo Reach by clearing a campaign mission on a legendary that died. You could get Marcus's do-rag from Gears 3 by beating the campaign. And once you unlock them, you could dress up your avatar with them. And that was a pretty cool little bonus. It was also more satisfying than an achievement to some extent, at least with some of them. You get a sombrero from Red Dead by shooting someone's hat off. You get a companion cube by beating Portal 2. Like, there was a lot of really cool stuff you could add to your character. And at the end of the day, you couldn't really do anything with them. Just kind of a fun little visual bonus. The whole concept of the avatar basically died out, though. It's almost completely gone from the Xbox dashboard. Apparently, there's some way to still view them, but I don't know what it is. And Nintendo discontinued the Mii channel. There are still Mii's that show up in certain games, but as a way to represent an online identity, the whole feature really isn't around anymore. Avatars were okay, but the rewards you could get around them were particularly fun, even if only a few games ever really took advantage of it. And number 6 is instant death QTEs. Short for quick time events. These things seem to be slowly disappearing from the gaming landscape. First coined in Shenmue, they kind of amount to cutscenes where you have to press a flash button and play on the screen to avoid failure or death. For a while, it seemed like every other game had some form of QTE in them, and it really got out of hand during the Xbox 360 PS3 era. Now, some people really hate these mechanics, and we're very vocal about it. Even with all that hate, though, it took developers a long time to finally phase that out. And there are still plenty of games with context action, a kind of evolved version of it that's way less irritating. And the Zupcade is actually good, but for the most part, the traditional QTE is pretty much over. So by traditional, you mean the ones where you have to press the button before you die, like in Resident Evil 4 or the Tomb Raider reboot, where they're filled with these kinds of death traps. And while these are both great games, the QTEs can kind of be a disruption as you're trying to go through them. I will say, there's something amusing about a QTE that is executed well. Like when the failure is particularly amusing and the load time isn't a problem. I don't really have it. That Terrible Spider-Man 3 game that we completely forgot comes on for its hilarious fail animation, for example, and it is impossible not to mention the amazing sequence of Heavy Rain, where you can fail repeatedly during the course of the chase scene, and it is genuinely one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a while. Most games these days are a lot less even if they happen, it's probably for the best. It's fun to watch the fail compilation, but it's less fun when you're one thing. And number 5 is package demo. Remember when games would come with 4 games? Of course, these days the package demo is basically unnecessary, as long as you have an internet connection, you can download a demo. But there was something fun about opening up a game and finding out all the demos it came with. PlayStation, for instance, had awesome demo discs, and if you had a PC back in the day, those classic PC Gamer demo discs were an amazing treasure trove of stuff. If you were a kid with a very low income, like myself, you weren't buying those magazines for the magazines. You were buying them for the demo discs. Well, it's funny to think about nowadays, but there were only certain games everybody bought just to get the demo. Like, people bought Crackdown just to get the Halo 3 beta. People bought Zone of Enders probably specifically to get the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo.
I've got Zone of Enders.
One awesome demo came packed in with Spyro 3. Like, you could play a limited version of Crash Bash on it, but with a code you could access most of the entire game. You basically got 2 games in one. And even though Crash Bash isn't the best game in the series, pretty great freebie. Demos even are seeing a bit of a resurgence lately, so the very concept of the game demo isn't something that's disappeared entirely. But demos packaged with other games, yet there's not really a reason for game makers to do it, but it is fun to think about all of the stuff that we got from that. And number 4 is instant fail stealth sections. It seems like almost every game these days has some kind of rudimentary stealth mechanic. So stealth itself is a concept that's probably never going to disappear from games. And I think that's good. What is disappearing, though, is that all these annoying instant fail stealth sections in games that everybody hates. Unlike lives or even QTEs, that's one thing I don't think that anybody's really going to want. These sections were the worst parts of their games and rightfully deserve to go into the dustbin of gaming history. For a while, they were everywhere, too. Probably the most recent example was on the PS4 Spider-Man game during the Miles Morales, Mary Jane sequences. But those were so easy, they weren't really that much of a problem. The really bad ones were from games in the PS2 Xbox era and the PS3 Xbox 360 era. Early Assassin's Creed loved these things, with Talon missions being some of the most boring and tedious of all of them. So many games snuck in stealth sections that really didn't need them, like the PS2 Hulk movie game, where it feels like half the game you spend sneaking around a boring military base as Bruce Banner, rather than doing the thing that you're playing the game for, you know, smashing stuff as the Hulk. Not even adventure games can escape these awful segments. Indigo Prophecy / Fahrenheit probably had one of the worst of all time, where your little kid's trying to sneak into a military base, which is just a silly scenario anyways. But David Cage has committed many gaming crimes over the years. This terrible stealth section, probably chief among those. These days, being caught usually means you have to kill the guys who saw you rather than getting a game over. And in general, stealth is just a lot better after a couple decades of developing it as a standard mechanic. It's certainly not all perfect, but it's gotten a lot better. And number 3 is local and online players together. Remember when you could play locally and online at the same time? Like, it wasn't common, but it was nice to have when you had friends over. For whatever reason, there's been much less games recently with split screen functionality, and that sucks. More options are always better when it comes to multiplayer, and couch co-op and couch competitive are just incredibly fun ways to have, like, your friends over the weekend and kill some time. Like, the few games that still do it, like Mario Kart 8, are usually the premier couch-type party games, but most multiplayer games don't even let you play in split screen, let alone online at the same time. As much as people complain about the Call of Duty franchise, it's got to be said that at least they still offer pretty decent split screen options. It sucks they eventually cut split screen online, but at least you can play with your friends locally if you choose to, even if it's a little more limited. I don't know, being able to play games online with local friends at the same time is a really nice thing. Like, you can coordinate with each other in the way that you would over a chat, except for there's the in-person, I'm hanging out with my friends aspect to it that is just a ton of fun. Like, you can order pizza together and a 2-liter of Mountain Dew and just devour a whole bag of Oreos. That is a weekend. And number 2 is discs that double as soundtracks. Kind of a secret thing, but some people who were playing games back during the 5th generation of consoles definitely remember, well, some probably don't even know about it, but certain disc-based games, you could actually put in a CD player and listen to their soundtrack. Now, it wasn't every game, it depended on the sound format, but games like Twisted Metal 4, Rainbow Six, you open that thing in the PlayStation BIOS, you put them in a CD player, you can listen to the soundtrack right there. It wasn't just PlayStation games either, you could do it with Sega CD and Saturn games, some of them at least. There were some PC games as well. I distinctly remember listening to Half-Life 1's soundtrack on the game CD. An awesome little bonus. I also remember when Rayman first came out. That was one I listened to a lot because it had a really different, interesting soundtrack. At that point in time, platformers all had kind of chiptune type music, and it was among the first that had a more expansive and seamless sounding soundtrack. Very crisp and well executed. Obviously, the whole CD market's dead and buried, so this little feature of some games is long dead. Listening to a game soundtrack is pretty much easier than ever now, but there was something kind of cool being able to use a game disc in an unexpected way. And finally, at number 1, it's interactive loading screens, or even mini-games on loading screens. Like, the last thing players want to see is a loading screen. Next-gen streaming technology combined with solid-state drives have almost made loading screens a thing of the past. So we're seeing less and less of this these days. A lot of the time, we even just see a loading screen or something for a split second. That's great. That obviously wasn't always the case, though. For some older games, it could take several minutes to load a game. And even games with shorter loading screens tended to have them all over the place to compensate. I don't think anybody's particularly sad to see this go. But with the loss of loading screens comes a loss of a pretty cool but rare thing that some developers would do, like give you something to do while the game loads. Usually with something kind of basic like shooting and slashing the loading screens on Devil May Cry, but some games are a little more creative, like in Bayonetta where you can practice combos on the loading screens. It was actually a way that I got better at playing Platinum Games type games. Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 had some weird little mini games you could do during loading screens. Probably the most impressive one was from Tekken 5, where for some reason you could play the 1991 arcade shooter Starblade while the game loaded. One reason this feature was so rare was because Namco apparently put a patent on it, so other publishers would have to pay them if they wanted to include this feature. Ignoring the absurdity of patenting a gameplay concept like that, the patent expired in 2015 and nobody really cared. There are about a dozen articles online celebrating the fact Namco's iron grip on the loading screen minigame was finally over, but how many games actually added one after 2015? I can't really even think of any because the loading screen was already on its way out by then. If there's no more or just significantly fewer and shorter loading screens, it's kind of hard to put minigames in them, you know? And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like the video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, thank you very much for watching this one. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter, Falcon Hero. See you next time, right here on Game Ranks. Sandboxes enable so many different things that, well, have nothing really to do with the game narrative or any of that. And that leads us to trying some stuff. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on Game Ranks, 10 big brain open world game experiments we try for no reason. Starting off with number 10, it's Elden Ring's Lightning Goats versus Bosses. Bosses in Elden Ring can be extremely difficult, but have you ever wondered how well they do against the humble lightning goat? If you're unaware of what a lightning goat is, it's a goat with a little bit more lightning. Why them? Well, why not? They're just as good as anything. I'm mostly curious just because how ridiculous they look. Their standard attack of rolling into you isn't particularly impressive, but the lightning damage they do is serious stuff. And that's just the thing that might give them an edge in the fight. So when I got to work trying to set up this totally legitimate experiment, I ran into some roadblocks. I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit here, folks, because you've probably seen a lot of bosses fighting each other in videos on YouTube. If you're like me and you didn't know how they made those, well, this is how we do it. It's a little thing called cheat engine. I'll throw out a big link and don't try this at all. This link here. Cheat engine stuff can be pretty sketchy even the best of times, but it's basically the play. There's a battle royale mod you can find. It's decent, but it can be very confusing. time I managed to get some lightning goats to fight Margaret, I'd assumed he'd get totally destroyed, but it was actually the other way around. And Margaret wiped the floor handily, but that's because I get a handicap. With the limiters removed, the goats proceeded to destroy Margaret in seconds. Same thing happened to the boss at the Stormvale Castle, Godric Drafted. Even just a few goats were sometimes more than many bosses could handle. Even one of the last bosses of the game, Godfrey, fell to the unstoppable muscle.
Time, the people who occupy my patch will find one of these, one of my pipes lying around the place, and no doubt they'll take it to the local museum and ask them what it is. And the curator will look very wise and he'll say, well, for about 4 centuries, from the 16th century to the 20th, there was a sort of religious ritual whereby they used to stuff these things with a certain dried herb and set fire to it and tuck some through it. And that went on until the 20th century, until there was a change in society, and a new priesthood came in, and the burning of that herb became taboo. And instead, people went over to indulging themselves with the chemical products of certain plants of the poppy family. I assure you that will happen, because some of the things that get into museums every day now, when people ask questions about. When I was young, in particular places, because like Birmingham, everybody knew exactly what they were. For instance, can you imagine what that is? Handmade for the job, made by the worker himself, probably with the help of a blacksmith, perhaps from a little bit of an old reaping hook. And there was a time when in the wooded parts, anyway, everybody knew this as well as people nowadays might know my pipe. And this is a commonplace tool at the time when everything was done by hand. Very sharp edge right down there, and a screw on the end. And it was used particularly for two things. Can you imagine what? Can you imagine two reasons why ordinary people making most of the things for their own lives should want to bore a tapered hole? Well, the answer is that it bored the bung-hole barrel. They also bored the hole in which the ladder makers put the rungs of the ladder. And this was a ladder maker's auger. Or auger, I think you would call it, yes.
Oh, I put it in all. Not an auger.
And these two,
I put it in all.
which look at first sight as if they might have had the same purpose. Except this one is made of wood beech, hardwood, and this is made of stone, a sort of shale. This was what we call a clog. The rope of a horse's halter went through a ring on his manger and then through there and a knot on the top. So this acted as a ring. And when the horse was eating from his manger, he could lift, raise his head and drop, and the rope was kept tight all the time, so it never slacked off, so you put his foot over it and get caught up. A stable clog. And people say to me that as soon as they see this, it must be the same thing. But as a matter of fact, it wasn't. And I'll tell you in a minute what it was. For the moment, I've got something else I want to show you. We were looking a little while ago at the ornamental plaiting of the horses' manes in order to put them on show. And it occurred to me that there's another trick with a horse's mane that it might entertain you to see, which can rarely be seen in England and couldn't be seen in England at all until recently because it belongs to a particular breed of horse. The horse, the Viking, the Norseman, what is sometimes called the Atlantic pony, or in other strains it's called the Fjord pony of Norway. The first time I ever saw one of these ponies was a Hollywood film called The Vikings. The chaps with the horns in their helmets were tearing about on these ponies. My friend John Holmes, the animal trainer, brought one of them over. This is she. And you'll notice something about her. The northern breeds of ponies, the primitive breeds of ponies, have done that. They were nearly all tan or yellow in some respect, some sort of tone, and they had right down their backs a little stripe. Little dark stripe along the spine.
Yeah, they look like what I would call
eel stripe. And when it got to the tail, you see it bunched out as part of the tail and became a sort of woolly stripe. And in the mane it did the same thing. And when the mane is long and it's hanging down over the side of the pony, you can't really see it at all except a sort of cloudiness within the mane. But if you do what the Vikings did with it, and what's still done with it in Scandinavia, you hogged it. Hogging a horse's mane is cutting it short so it sticks up straight. The manes of rocking horses were always represented as hogged when I was a child. If you hog it, and then with your sheep shears, which is what he's doing, we used actually to shear sheep with those things from sheep to now big arm egg. And if you hog it differentially, so the two light sides of it are cut low, and the eel stripe standing up in the middle of it is cut higher, you get a most picturesque rocking horse effect, which is characteristic of these ponies, and it's their badge. They're absolutely smashing ponies. They're quiet and strong and very intelligent. The only thing is, we got one disadvantage. They're born in wild mountainous places, and their mothers say to the children, every time you see anything, eat it, because food is hard to get. And so the devil it is to keep the fat off them. They'll knock you down for food, even when they're so fat that you really want to get the weight off them. Now, another thing that could sensibly end up in a museum, except it looks like nothing at all, therefore it would be difficult to explain why it was there, is this. Wonder if you imagine what that stick was cut for. It's a particularly fine stick. It looks like any other stick, perhaps to a non-stick person. But the fact of the matter is, it's a piece of blackthorn. It's a piece of blackthorn which is nearly an inch in diameter, level all the way. And it's dried over the years since it was cut, as hard as iron. Once upon a time it had a great big thorn on every one of those scars. And that, in fact, was what that was used for that I was showing you. Those thorns were taken off with it like that, and thus the stick was smooth, and it was a broom maker's art of sticking. It's actually based on gilt, because my great-great-great-great-grandfather, Dan Hartley, invented the spinning gem. He was the man who got the women out of the cottages into the room sheds of Lancashire and Yorkshire. He was the man who made obsolete the spinning wheel. And perhaps understandably, he was chased out of the yard by his own men. However, I have to say, Elizabeth Gilbert was never taken up to death by ancestor and continued the art of spinning in all forms. Now then, in that we know to travel, etc., to learn the art of spinning into as it's done differently in other remote places. I love to watch now she's cutting, she's an island sweater. And you notice she's been picking the wool from particular parts of the fleece, because one thing that a woman had to know before she was a spinner, or spinster as the word became later, was how the different pieces of the wool, shoulder, the belly, and so on, the different breeds of wool used for different purposes. And she puts the wool through these two carving combs, formed with millions of tiny spikes, which, when she works in this way, will pull every thread, every of the fleece out straight. So each is pulled out, and they lie individually, side by side. Having done that, he turns it over on the back and rolls it up into a sausage. There's a sausage of neatly extended threads all lying together. She has a basket full of those before she starts spinning. And the spinning wheel goes round and round, and by a belt made simply in the thread, it drives the spindle. And she feeds the wool into the spindle at a very light tension. It extends each of these sausages in turn and lets it go quite quickly, producing a not very hard twisted thread, or yarn, as I think I should say, in the case of wool. And then, as the threads all catch up with one another with their tiny invisible hooks, and then she causes the next sausage to catch on to the end of the thread by the same method, and once again she does it. This art of spinning is really an art because it depends on long experience, feel, tension, and so on. It's on a good day, a woman will spin well. On a bad day, she'll spin badly. And as she gets more and more experienced at it, she'll spin instinctively. Her hands will do the things by feel while she talks to her friends or sings with her friends. Because this long, extended activity with all the women sitting together at each other's back doors was a time of all the talk, a time of all the gossip, and it was a time of all the songs. All the old Hebridean songs and the favourite peasant songs came to existence in groups of spinning women. Elizabeth told me that in one of her travels, when she was talking to friends and found out, said to her, spinning is no man can ever enter it. No man can ever understand the spirit of it. And now you see she's doing something different. She's now spinning a worsted thread as opposed to a wool. What she does now is to take the lumps of wool uncarded and spin them at a much tighter tension, putting in much more twist in them. See? And just causing one lump of uncarded wool to catch hold of the previous one, and that sort of thing. And this produces a much harder, stronger, less friendly thread, actually. This is a thread that's used for a man's coat, perhaps, and certainly not for a soft sweater. Now, well, of course, they spun from the very beginning.
Oh, looks fucking same to me.
From the very beginning.
Yeah, right. That looks a bit thinner, actually. Yeah.
But that wasn't all they spun. On the farm when I was young, we had in a bottom drawer 2 pairs of sheets, linen sheets, which had been woven from flax, grown on the farm, spun on the farm, and woven in the loom in the attic by the visiting weaver who used to come round. He was a suspect character. He spent a long time in the house when the men were out in the fields, and there were many children in the district who were believed to be sons of the weaver. This linen thread comes from the inside of the blue flax plant, the stems of it. It's extraordinary. It looks like quite a hard stem. There's a skin on the stem, and there's a hard core on the stem. And in between those two lie these fibres, and they have to be got out by being soaked. I think they call it retted, until the skin rots and then beaten out and then dried. And now that she's got them, she has to do this with it. She has to arrange them all over one another in what is called a tress. Marvellous how many of our words come from the old-fashioned things that we used for centuries, like spinster. This is a flaxen tress. As in all the novels, they talk about people having flaxen tresses. And you must admit that it does look very like a beautiful fair-haired girl's head of hair by the time she's finished with it. And it goes on this distaff. This is the distaff, which will hold the tress and keep it in a position to be spun. She ties it on the top of the distaff with the ribbon that's round her waist, tying it with the middle of the ribbon, leaving two long ends, and then she folds it over itself like this, more and more like a handsome head of hair, puts the distaff in its stool. She could carry about. In the old days they used to carry a distaff about over their shoulder and spin from it with a spindle, even when they were walking down the road. And then the rest of the ribbon is used to tie that together like that. And this beautiful flaxen thread comes off the distaff and is spun on the spinning wheel in exactly the same way. And there's a tremendous art in this because they can spin anything from the finest linen thread, which was used for the most beautiful linen handkerchiefs, all the way to a thick linen thread that would produce a linen canvas apron for heavy work, which was almost indestructible. But it can be only done with your hands wet. It won't work with dry hands. So you watch yourself dipping her fingers and look at that thread come out of there. You wash her hand and it needs that little bit of damp to make it work. And so her hand went in and out of the bowl. And that, in its turn, would happen quite instinctively, while talk and singing went on, and she had one eye on the pot and the other on the children. Nevertheless, her hand would always go into the... And there is a linen scarf, which she has woven from heavy linen thread spun by herself.
Ah, that's fucking awesome. It is, it's really
And that's worth a bit more than man-made fibre. Now this is a surprise because this is silk. You don't probably expect women to spin silk because we all believe,
why?
in fact,
Silk's always handmade,
that
isn't it?
that the silk is
Well,
automatically
the
spun
best
out of the
silk
chrysalis of the silkworm,
I should say.
which is dropped into hot water
Yeah,
and the
it
thread
probably
pulled
is
out.
that,
And
I'm
while
sure
this
it
is
is.
happening, you get a lot of waste and short thread and so on and stuff
Yeah,
which
that-
doesn't quite
that-
work
that-
right.
yeah.
And this is always called, in the extraction of silk, the slub. And this slub was taken by the women and spun to make a heavy silk thread. And slub silk is a word that's used nowadays still. Elizabeth gets this from one of the few silkworm farms that are in England. She takes their slub and she spins it. It used to be on a great deal in India. There's a place I think it's called in India called Tussore, where this was done. And this used to produce the heavy Tussore silk, which the high-class English used to wear in India. You'd see a man with white cock feathers in his hat and a white silk thing, and
I scarf one.
he would be wearing
I
a
did.
Tussore silk.
Just the
Fancy.
same
And
as
there,
that, actually.
in turn, is a slub silk
Did.
scarf
Another one that had
Once
fucking
again,
out ran to it.
well,
I think some fucking company.
for what she has spun.
Yeah.
Now that spinning
Yeah,
wheel
proper
was in
fucking
itself
silk scarf.
a development.
Some company.
There's an original spindle. didn't have a stone on the end
Well,
of this case.
they
It
know
had
what they are.
a wooden disc, but it's the same original thing. She just gives a
Right,
spindle and
cool.
twist and then feeds it and that
Right.
little thing. And I've seen women in
And
Yugoslavia
they know
standing
they
in the
are.
mountains with a distaff over
Don't
their shoulders, spinning
Sure.
with a spindle like that. And then the time came when somebody discovered you could put a flywheel on the
Still
spindle.
denies it.
And that was the first spinning wheel. They hadn't invented the treadle yet. So that was called the Great Wheel. Elizabeth is one of the only people I know who's got one. And there she is spinning exactly like they spin on the Bayeux tapestry on the early pictures of English life. So that's all that follows from this. This, which I said, might be the weight of a spindle. I told you what it might be, but I never told you what it was. The truth of the matter was it was the weight, stone weight, from a salmon poacher's net. They found this net in the bottom of a sea trout pool where these roller weights, 3 of them were left and hadn't been carried away from the counter. They were still fastened to the remains of the net. And so we knew exactly what they were. Chaps would come along at night with the net, drop it in and pull it up against the current with those weights rolling and get away with it. That's what it was. And now I'm due on the board.
Right, see you later then, Jack. What's happening with all this thunder?
Son, yes. Well, it's time to go home.
Hello, HUK.
Sorry, I'm feeling very lonely.
It's okay, we can help you.
Joan Collins has a birthday today. She's 90. Happy birthday. And Dame Joan. And what an amazing actress. I remember her in the Girl in the Red Velvet Swing, Dynasty, of course. And little snippets in so many interesting things, including the only decent
The stud.
scene in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, the filmed version. She's watchable in anything that she seems to do. So today she gave an interview saying that she continues working because she has to keep herself in the style to which she's become accustomed. She can't fly anything other than first class, and if she does, people will natter and will gossip what Alexis Carrington in steerage. So yeah, there are standards, and Dame Joan meets them grandly, and long may she continue to do so. Happy birthday. The outcry against Robert Jenrick's decision about cartoons gathers pace. Natasha Sangavnikes, who's the Associate Director of the Freedom from Torture group, and so it's a combined of fights with Secretary of the Oxford Branch. And
She's 90 years old.
she says millions of caring people up and down the UK will not stand for this. And compassion and reason are with it. I think she's being over-optimistic. Just last week, the government suffered major blows with the Court of Appeal ruling it's immoral Rwanda
She was so rude in the stud.
and key defeats to their cruel refugee ban bill in the House of Lords. instead of continuing to punish people who have already been through so much, this government should concentrate on rebuilding an asylum system that treats people with dignity and kindness. The asylum system, the asylum centre in question, the people there said they were not happy, former government ministers,
Right,
former government
she looked
advisors
fantastic,
have also
isn't
been
She
speaking
did,
out.
yeah, she's got all
Not
like
all
the
of
kit
them.
on, you know what I mean? Like suspenders, everything. Like. She looked
By
fantastic.
name, some of them anonymously.
It's like watching a
One of them
fucking...
saying country
Yeah,
is going
man.
to the dog, so instead we focus on painting over a picture of
Go and watch
Mickey Mouse
the
to cheer
sport.
up kids who have fled with only the clothes on their back. What a disgrace. Well, the person who's actually used slightly more colourful language to describe the sort of disgrace that is Nigel Farage.
Well, that's how it was.
That architect of Brexit has. I mean, I think Farage is an honest individual and essentially a good man, despite his advocacy for Brexit. And he says, what was those crossing the channel should not get 4 stars treatment. This measure is a bit mean. He's right. These kids are just pawns in a criminal enterprise. He's right. The Conservative peer, Lord Kirkhope, a former immigration minister who oversaw the 1996 Bosnian refugee resettlement program, said that the situation was unfortunate. A person calling LBC Radio said, I don't think I would do it myself that way. Actually, that's him, Lord Kirkhope. I don't think I would do it myself that way. It's contrary to what I believe is the historical friendliness and openness of our society and our country. It's a shame because we have a reputation, we have a background we can be proud of, even if it is a little while ago, and I just want to restore it again. The obsession with nastiness, and it's as if Robert Jenrick is eyeing the crown of becoming the next Home Secretary. It's as if he realises that Suella Braverman's time is now limited and a reshuffle is imminent and she is about to be shown the door. And he thinks that he's more likely to get the top job if he shows that he is unpleasant. Well, I mean, all he has to do is look back over the previous Home Secretaries. You see Theresa May, unpleasant. She was the person who initiated the hostile environment. Priti Patel, unpleasant, and she demonstrated her credentials by bullying her staff. Suella Braverman, unpleasant. She's demonstrated on countless occasions the level of her qualities, standing at the dispatch box, hammering Albania, invasion, and then Pakistan. And is there any depth to which she will not sink? I think not, actually. I think not. No. And Robert Jenrick. Robert Jenrick so far has seemed quite sort of tame, except in sort of slightly dodgy expenses issues. But no, now he wants to demonstrate just how nasty he can be. Quite clearly, Suella Braverman is hanging on by her fingernails to this job, and Jenrick has got his eye on the prize.
Dive into 888 Casino, because it's made to blow minds. Relax. It's made for the unknown. It's made to take a chance. It's just made to play. And now, get 10 free spins on Holy Mackerel Extreme Fishing. You play today at 888casino.com. That works.
888 Casino. Pay to play. Republican.
Yeah, well, I know what that's about. Okay, don't worry about that shit.
The national newspapers seem to be catching up with my concerns. I've been banging on about this for certainly the last 4 years, about the appalling state of the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, the Digital Culture, Media and Sport formerly, and how over the last 13 years there have been 12 different Secretaries of State and all of them useless, with possibly the exception of Jeremy Hunt, who was in position for 2 years, which is significantly more than, let's say, Matt Hancock, who was the 6th of the Conservative Culture Secretaries, who was in post for 6 months. 6 months. There's another cabinet reshuffle coming up, so I presume Lisa Fraser will go elsewhere. The Observer has done quite an interesting spread on this and has said that the Culture Secretary is now seen as the foothills of a ministerial career, a lily pad in the pond of political ambition. And it's extraordinary, the names of the Conservative Culture Secretaries: Hunt, Sajid Javid, Matt Hancock, Nadine Dorries. These are household names. And also Oliver Dowden, now the chairman of the Conservative Party. None of these people are, at Nicky Morgan now in the House
What?
of Lords, none of these people
I thought she
are
quit.
individuals who you would associate with the arts. Unlike the string of culture secretaries in the last Labour Party, Chris Smith, appointed in 1997, having been the Shadows Health Secretary, a job which I think he expected to be continuing when Tony Blair's government acquired office. But he was quite happy. He described it as a perfect fit, a job that he was well equipped to do when he was given the job of Culture Secretary. And he considered that the job was, the ministry, the culture, was something deep and abiding of importance. It was significant to the nation. It is the job, he said, that makes life worth living. And among the things he did was to get regional rejuvenation funding, £25 million, and he was succeeded by Tessa Jowell, who was also an arts enthusiast. But there were the three
Well, it's
ministers,
doing
Jeremy,
I know,
very
Anne's
short-lived,
good at
Gordon Brown
yeah, she's got good at it.
administration,
I know,
but
I
then, of course,
know,
the
well,
Labour
I
Party
like
was in
Sparky.
trouble and
I
unfocused.
know the good people are.
But even they
Anne's a
were
good person.
committed to sustaining and helping us and
No,
helping
I'm a
the
good
arts. But
sparring partner. Trust me.
let's say
Don't trust me.
out of
No, I'm
11
a good sparring
of the
partner.
culture secretaries,
You
let's
name it. You will have
let's
physical
give
or
Hunt a
physical
little bit
fight.
of
You want to talk?
respect. Not much, but a little bit.
Well,
11. It's
I'll
extraordinary how completely
is very
uninterested they are. The story, which was written by the person who wrote it, I can't see. No, I can't see who wrote this story. Oh, no, not Nicholas Hyde, no. He's interviewed, not
these are
Kit,
top people.
Buchan. I have no idea. Well, whoever wrote it in the Observer has done a very good job, and has surveyed the 11 remaining ministers, and Kit Buchan has done this biography of them all, and there's very little of purpose. The nonsense of Nadine Dorries, Kit Buchan says, seeming to believe in 2022 that the internet was only 10 years old, mistaking rugby league for rugby union, moving to privatise Channel 4 despite not understanding its funding model, and saying the high point of her tenure was a grand video about new Ofcom regulations, including the
that's
immortal
dark,
right.
right, that's not
Is it
what it
true
was.
it will impact freedom of expression? No. We put in legal protections
Yeah, it was
in the
really quite
19th
dark.
section.
I might have to turn them off again.
I don't see the immortal right there, but there we are. Anyway, Sajid Javid was the third
Difficult
culture
having
secretary of
one.
this administration.
Yeah, it was really
Hancock
dark.
the sixth, only 6 months, Oliver Dowden the ninth. And what do they all have in common? I think 4 things, and I'm taking this largely from this article, from reading the article, and from my own thoughts. First of all, the sheer number of ministers perpetuates a lack of continuity. Secondly, their focus on active destruction. Oh yes, Nicky Morgan is interviewed at the beginning of this article, and she pretty well says that there's not many votes to be found in the seats of the Royal Opera House. Art and culture is either too highbrow or too left-wing to be of interest to the Conservative Party. I find that an extraordinary decision, to be so dismissed, and yet at the same time the arts underpin our society, and it's the arts that we are exporting so vigorously, the arts, television. We are talking about the arts all the time, or sport, and this active destruction of culture. In the case of La Dores, the article says it's like lobbing a hand grenade, cutting £24 million with one quick decision about London, which literally has compromised or even destroyed the funding of the Britten Sinfonietta, the English National Opera, funding cut to 0, and told to move north to Manchester to compete directly with Opera North, or compromising Opera North's enormous efforts, or indeed to compete directly with Scottish National Opera, equally compromising their enormous efforts. I remember writing or doing a translation for Scottish National Opera's Opera Go Round, I think it was called, where they took opera around the islands, and I did a thing, an Offenbach operetta, and it's extraordinary. The arts works on a shoestring anyway, so it can deliver with almost 0 funding, but it's compromised, and it can't plan ahead if next week we have another.
I don't know if run out batches or whether it. Yeah, I wish. Yeah, maybe it's got time limit on it. It's